Hello, I'm Robin. Welcome to Bookspin. Ralpha Boulevard was first published in the Magazine of Fantasy and Science Fiction, June 1961. And this is a novelette that explores the beginning of the spread of the rediscovery of man. Now, this term, the rediscovery of man, refers to a key episode in Cordwainer Smith's future history, and that is the instrumentality's decision to finally end the stale, dreary utopia that it has been enforcing upon its citizens for countless generations, to bring back risk and uncertainty and suffering to mankind. In other words, to restore the full spectrum of human experience. It is, of course, also the title of this collection, which collects all of Cordwainer Smith's stories, all of his short stories, which I'm going through. And the roots of this movement can be seen in the story Under Old Earth, which I previously discussed a few videos back. I feel like Ralpha Boulevard is a natural follow-up to that story. Now, I'd just like to share with you the opening segment of this story, which I think really encapsulates just what the rediscovery of man is all about in quite an evocative way. So this is narrated by the protagonist, who is an instrumentality citizen called Paul. We were drunk with happiness in those early years. Everybody was, especially the young people. These were the first years of the rediscovery of man, when the instrumentality dug deep in the treasury, reconstructing the old cultures, the old languages, and even the old troubles. The nightmare of perfection had taken our forefathers to the edge of suicide. Now, under the leadership of the Lord Jestocos and the Lady Alice More, the ancient civilizations were rising like great landmasses out of the sea of the past. So Lady Alice More, by the way, is the character also known as Santuna in Under Old Earth, who I talked about in my review of that story. I myself was the first man to put a postage stamp on a letter after 14,000 years. I took Virginia to hear the first piano recital. We watched at the eye machine when cholera was released in Tasmania, and we saw the Tasmanians dancing in the streets, now that they did not have to be protected anymore. Everywhere things became exciting. Everywhere men and women worked with a wild will to build a more imperfect world. I myself went into a hospital and came out French. Of course, I remembered my early life. I remembered it, but it did not matter. Virginia was French too, and we had the years of our future lying ahead of us like ripe fruit hanging in an orchard of perpetual summers. We had no idea when we would die. Formerly, I would be able to go to bed and think, the government has given me 400 years. 374 years from now, they will stop the strewn injections and I will then die. Now I knew anything could happen. The safety devices had been turned off. The diseases ran free. With luck and hope and love, I might live 1,000 years, or I might die tomorrow. I was free. We revelled in every moment of the day. So yeah, that's quite a powerful opening, I think. And it reveals quite a lot of the interesting aspects of the world building of this universe. This then is the story of Paul and Virginia, two old friends, newly emerged as French citizens, enjoying this great new cultural renaissance for humanity, and they fall in love. It's all very romantic. It's all great. But something's not quite right for Virginia. Virginia is suffering over doubts over whether their love is genuine or if it's a construct of the new personality that she's been given in this world. Funnily enough, Paul doesn't seem to mind. His attitude is basically, it doesn't matter, either way we're still happy together. But this is important to Virginia. She wants to confirm that her love for Paul is of her own free will. And so the couple set out on a quest to an entity called the Aberdingo, which is an ancient supercomputer up in the sky that can foretell the future and can answer all questions. So again, we've got some very weird Cordwainer Smith world building going on in the story. Now, in order to get to the Aberdingo, they have to ascend a processional highway that goes up into the clouds. So this is Ralpha Boulevard, and they enlist the help of a stranger they meet, a man called Marked, to get there. And it turns out to be quite an eventful and perilous journey. And without wishing going into any spoilers, things do take a rather unpredictable turn, culminating in a dramatic storm up in the sky. So, there are a few aspects to this story which I found interesting. So firstly, there are two sources which were inspirations for Smith when he was creating a story. And the first was the 18th century novel Paul et Virginie, which clearly serves as a foundation for the arc of these two characters within a revival of French culture. And then the second source is Pierre-Auguste Cotte's painting, The Storm, which inspired the storm scene in which we can see two lovers lashed by wind and rain. And this is basically how it turns out for Paul and Virginia on their way down the boulevard. Secondly, the second thing I found interesting in the story is we get the first mention of Kamel, this character, right, who is a cat woman who reappears as the title character in the next story, which I'll be talking about, which is The Ballad of Lost Kamel. And she is also an important character, or she plays an important role in Australia, the novel, which I'll also be moving on to very soon. Now, in this story, she only plays she only appears briefly, but her interactions with Paul and Virginia demonstrate that despite the advancements of the new era, underpeople are still second-class citizens in this world and are still looked down upon by humanity. Underpeople, of course, being the subclass of intelligent humanoids derived from animal stock, of which Kamel is one of. Interestingly, in this story, they're not referred to as underpeople, but as homunculi. And Virginia, in particular, is very bigoted towards them. And despite the fact that Kamel actually saves the couple early on in the story from a dangerous situation, Virginia laments the indignity of just the fact that she has to even talk to her. And this also serves as a catalyst for a couple of elements in the plot. The final thing, which I found quite interesting, was one aspect of the world building that we get introduced to when Paul and Virginia and Marked are going up Ralpha Boulevard. So this is just a small detail, but I find it quite interesting. So they start getting hungry on their journey. Paul starts to get worried when he realizes that the boulevard doesn't contain any supplies of food. Because, you know, within the previous utopian existence, food is one of those things which was freely provided to everyone. So Paul keeps on striking lampposts on the boulevard, expecting them to dispense food, which must have been how things were before in the pre-Rediscovery of Man days. And to me, this instantly brought to mind the Grail Stones in Philip Jose Farmer's Riverworld series, which is a very similar concept. They're basically these containers that convert energy into food and other necessities for people who are resurrected in Riverworld, which is kind of the artificially constructed afterlife. It's an important part of the world building of that series, and I do wonder if Farmer was at all influenced by this story. It could just be a coincidence, of course. Anyway, this is an interesting story, I think. It's quite a trippy one. There's a fair amount of surrealistic imagery. The whole voyage across the highway into the clouds, it maintains quite a haunting feel throughout. There are some tensions that develop between Paul, Virginia, and Marked, which almost take on the feel of a love triangle. And there is a palpable, ominous mood that grows as these three characters progress on their journey. So you kind of get a feeling as you're reading this that it's going to end in tragedy somehow. I won't reveal anything else from here, but I do recommend that you check this out to find out what happens. Apart from anything else, it's worth reading for explorations of the themes of the rediscovery of man and some of the philosophical and moral questions that it raises, right? So all in all, it's a strange but compelling and thought-provoking story.